What went so wrong for Luke Altmeyer?
Yeah, that's really a good question. Number one, I think it's really as being the guy. I know he played some in a bowl game at Ole Miss, but as being the guy at Illinois is really his first big top ranked opponent game, right? At home. I think he tried to do too much, number one. Number two, he didn't get sacked as much as you might have thought, but he took a lot of hits. One thing I'll give Luke Altmeyer a lot of credit for, and we saw this on the fourth down play in Toledo, is he has the ability to realize I'm getting sacked. I need to get the ball and throw it away. He doesn't hold on to the ball too long. I think that's actually a good quality that he possesses. Unfortunately, when you're throwing the ball away in over the middle, under pressure or into tight coverage with some great athletes he was thrown against, it can lead to some interceptions, right? Some of those he should just throw into the upper deck if he could have, and he didn't do that, right? At the same time, I think also he got down and he really let the first mistake compound the second, third, and fourth. And so I think that's a mental toughness thing. He's going to learn. Remember, he doesn't have nearly as much. We knew there's going to be some growing pains. The knock, I think he's from a skill set perspective, has a little more talent than Tommy DeVito, but from an experience, does not have the same experience. And so I think what we saw a quarterback really go into the tank mentally, because he still has the ability there, but just was making throws that were uncharacteristic. And I think ultimately that's why they had to say, hey, we can't put him back out there and we've got to make a switch. I think he'll learn from that. I don't think it's a physical thing. It was more of a mental thing, and you're getting hit and hit and hit and hit. And they really bottled him up on the run game as well. And so he didn't have that to fall back on, so it was difficult.
Yeah, Jay, I think what was so impressive of the first two games with him was his ability to bounce back from those mistakes. I think we all knew these mistakes would happen with a first-time starting quarterback with so few reps of experience. So what is the key for him and the staff after a game like this, the 48 hours after it, the week after it leading into Florida Atlantic, to get him back confident? Because we know he's a playmaker. He's pretty good. You can't let 4 interceptions one game carry over into the next game.
Yeah, you can't lose the next game because you're worried, you're sad about the previous game. I always like to say, when I'm talking to youth football teams, you like to have these catchy lines. You can't live in the guilt or the glory of the last play. You have to play the next play. Sometimes you get overly excited about a great play and then you don't do good the next play, or you get overly guilty about the last play and you don't do great the next play. And so I think this is where the coaches really make their money, honestly, because they got to keep Luke Altmeyer, a guy from going in the tank. And to your point, actually responded really well in those first two games to some mistakes that he made. So he has the capacity to do that. Let's remember, Luke Altmeyer is 20 years old. He's still a young guy, right? He's still got lots of reps to play. He's going to be a good player. He also, we don't have a guy right now that we can go to for a catch. Who's the guy that I can go I need a catch? We thought that might be Pat Bryant. Hasn't been the last 2 weeks. We thought that might be Isaiah Williams. I would say he's that guy on short routes, but maybe not on longer routes. Casey Washington, he's a guy that can do contested catches, but quite frankly, can't get the separation. And there was some, it looked like there was 4 or 5 targets to Casey Washington and 2 or 3 picks on those targets, right? So we don't necessarily have a guy. I think that could be possibly Tip Ryman. He seems to be a good security blanket guy. I know that it's not maybe your usual suspect you were thinking, but they seem to have a good rhythm on giving him the ball on short passes, something to kind of get his confidence back going. And also, Barry Lunny, being a former quarterback himself, has got to really get into his head and realize, hey, it's going to be okay. Let's move forward.
Jay, let's talk about that offensive line. Penn State's defense is really good. Their front set, those linebackers, man. Abdul Carter is a really good player. But Illinois reworks the offensive line. Only gave up 1 sack in the first 3 quarters, but he was constantly under pressure against that great Penn State defensive front. What did you see out of that group? Because it still seems like they're not getting the offensive line play they expected yet this year.
Yeah, so I would say this. I think Zy Chrysler is a better guard than he is tackle. Definitely feels more comfortable. Unfortunately, I think Isaiah Adams is a better guard than he is tackle. And that's not to say that Isaiah Adams didn't play decent. I just think when you think road grader and, offensive guard, Isaiah Adams is the prototype for that. Really, he really is. Although he's athletic enough and smart enough to do that and does that for the team, I think we're still having some issues. Julian Pearl, for the most part, has quietly been solid and okay. Like, I thought he's been solid. I think we knew that Geske and even Kreutz would have some growing pains. I mean, the center play has really been outstanding the last couple of years for Illinois, Pilstrom and also with Doug Kramer. And Kreutz is a young football player. I think he's going to be a great football player. He's got some growing pains as well. And so we're not great on the protection. But we're also going on some very good front. Chop Robinson's probably a first-round pick. Abdul Carter blitzing, covering, he's probably going to be a first-round pick at some point. King's probably a first-round pick. They have first-round picks at every level. And so this is a talented defense. I didn't think the offensive line played horrible, but certainly didn't give us the time that we needed.
Yeah. Jay, you mentioned, I was thinking about after this game, Reggie Love is consistent, solid, reliable. He just screams tough, smart, dependable. And you see on that run, that touchdown run, like, that's kind of what Brett Bielema wants to be. So if you had 11 Reggie Loves on the field, I think you'd feel pretty good. But really, him and Isaiah Williams seem like the only consistent skill players at this position. Given that, Casey's consistent, tough, smart, dependable, but just not a guy who gets separation. We saw some young guys get in there. Caden Fagan, Malik Elzy, Kenari Wilcher, Ashton Hollins. We're seeing a little bit more of Hank Beatty the last couple of weeks. Is it time to get more reps for those guys, or what is that like? Like, how does a coaching staff work in freshmen who might not be as good at the details as, say, a Pat Bryant in blocking or Casey Washington at blocking and route running and all that?
Well, if you're Ron Zook, really, it's Ben starts from day one, I think. But, so I think it's a different style. I think it's a developmental program. Zook, not to say Zook didn't develop people. I'm not saying that at all, but I think he gave a chance for guys to play early if the measurables were there. I think it's time that we see some of these guys. I really do. I think Malik Elzy earned himself some more playing time by getting that contested catch. He's just a different type of athlete than we're accustomed to seeing in the receiver room. I mean, the size, the physicality, the speed. I don't think you can keep him off the field. I think Caden Fagan is another guy who is going to start getting some reps from Josh McCray. They're similar builds, but I think that Fagan seems to have a little bit better acceleration out of the hole from what I could see, and maybe a little bit more versatility to run, a big fullback or H-back position in different sets where he could protect along with Ryman. Now, that's asking him to do a lot as a true freshman. I know he was here during the spring, but I think that this is like, we're still building this program. I think you need to get him. Wilcher and Beatty, those are guys. Can they get more separation than the other guys is the question. If they can't, you're certainly not going to put them in because their body types don't necessarily warrant them to get in if they can't get separation, right? So I think you only put Wilcher and Beatty in. I thought Ashton Hollins I heard you mention this on your post-game pod with Wagner, and that route, that combination was a good call by Lunny to kind of get Ashton Hollins in space. Wasn't a great thrown ball, kind of underthrown, but Hollins kind of has the speed and length too that makes you feel like he's a little bit different, kind of like Elzy. And I know Pat Bryant has the body. I mean, they say he doesn't look nearly as tall as Hollins, Pat Bryant, or as big as Elzy. And I think Bryant can be good. He just has not gotten open the way we thought he'd get open the last two games. But I think he's still probably the most complete receiver on this team. But to your question, do I think we need to get those guys on? Yes. I think we need to have the best 11 playing, and you got to mix up your personnel to how do I get the best 11 on the field, right? Yeah. I certainly think Reggie and Isaiah are part of that. But I think there's some discrepancy based on personnel on who those other three skill guys could be in the football game.
Jay, we talked last week. Okay, you got 2 weeks of sample size for the defense. They had to change some things. We'll get into those here in a second. But if you're Barry Lunny this week and you struggled, your quarterback struggled like that, and you just haven't been able to get in a rhythm offensively, like, what do you think this offense needs right now?
Well, it's interesting because in Brett's post-game press conference, he said they really focused on that opening drive, right? And there's little things, and if you go back and look at those little things, they really made a difference on that opening drive. Altmeyer has one of his better runs and slips for a 7-yard gain. He probably could have had a 15-yard gain. which puts us even closer into field goal range. We then get a penalty, I believe, on one of the linemen for a false start. I think it was Geske, got a false start, backed us up, right? We then missed the field goal and don't get points, which I think was a little deflating for that team that had focused so much. That would have been big. I don't think we've actually seen a whole offensive game plan actually play out. I'm imagining the offensive coaches and Barry Lunny having this whole plan. And if a good offensive coordinator always sets up a defense in the first quarter to come back and hit him with something that looks like what they hit him with in the first quarter, but it's just a little bit different, right? And they're setting up plays throughout the game. We haven't had a chance to actually do that. I think that because we've gotten behind or because of turnovers, it's kind of been in scramble mode offensively. I don't think we've seen the talent that Barry Lunny can call plays with because of all those issues. And so I don't think we've actually seen a game that's called the way that Barry Lunny wants to call it, or that it's actually been game planned, just because of how it's all worked out. And part of that issue is that there is nothing right now that this offense can hang its hat on. At least we had Chase Brown no matter what, right?
Yep.
Stuff hits the fan. Let's get back. Let's get right. Let's give the ball to Chase, right? And one thing I saw too defensively from Penn State, Manny Diaz runs a defense that I would call is a spill defense, meaning that he's going to make everything spill east and west to the outside and make those running backs get to the outside. You'll see a couple plays in the first half. We actually get the edge, right? I mean, there's a lot of bodies. If you just take a screenshot of that of that tape, you'll see a lot of bodies condensed on Manny Diaz's defense trying to get upfield and make the ball bounce outside. If we had a guy like Chase Brown, we would have had a couple touchdowns actually in the first quarter. You can see it with Reggie. I like Reggie. He was able to get the edge, but he was not able to make guys miss in space when he could have made guys miss in space. Maybe like Chase might have been able to do that. And so we missed out on a couple of big plays because the way Manny Diaz's defense is he's going to make everything go east and west. He's going to give up the edge sometime, but he's also going to get a tremendous amount of pressure right up the middle of that that offense. And so you'll see us get the edge sometime, but we don't have the speed to really get around it and get a breakaway.
That's kind of a tease for our film room, Jay, because I got a lot of interior pressures that Illinois struggle with. Manny Diaz loaded up on that.
Manny Diaz, I will tell you, he's great at interior pressure. I think they give up a lot as far as being soft on the edge. They also have a first round pick. Who are your edge players? Well, I got to be strong at defensive end and my cornerback. I've got first round picks there. So I can get away with doing that, right? Because I have an athlete that could probably make up for something that happens. But that's the way Manny Diaz is going to do it.